Okay, so I would like to say something about Mark's profile. Okay, he is an important research and analyst and writer. We have other 30 years experience in public health. Mark supports a data governance project in the World Bank and World Health Organization and another institute. Is the lead author of the European Commission API framework for digital government. It's a very important project. Ian's the principal advisor of the Open Data Institute. Open data is the ODI is a hub to discussion and to analyze it and to make project in the open data. It's a very important. In ODI, Martin developed several projects for maturity health data ecosystems in Europe. Okay, Marx is the director of the Platform is an important company to creating health data and governance tools. In resume, Mark won the best thinkers and experts in open everything. Okay, it's a guy in terms of the data governance framework. So we separate this session in two parts. Okay, in the first part, Mark introduces some presentation about the measuring value in open health ecosystems. In the second part, we talk about some questions, okay? Mark, thank you once again, and good session for everyone. Go ahead, Mark.
It's wonderful to be here, and thank you all for joining us to hear this and for the excellent introduction, Guilherme. Okay, so I'm presuming my slides are up on the screen in front of everyone. So I'll work my way through them. Okay. So from my screen, I can't see them being up there. So I'll trust that they're in front of the audience. Okay, so I won't go over the these initial slides since Guilherme has done such a great introduction. Thank you there for my health data policy experience. You know, starting in patient representative organisations in Australia, working in health equity, and some of those projects that Guilherme has mentioned there as well. And then alongside, while I've got 30 years experience, having started my professional career working in the HIV/AIDS crisis in Australia, since then I've also been thinking about when we open up data so that it can be used for health and for other areas, then I get into thinking about open everything as Guilherme led us into. And so under that banner, I've worked around open ecosystem development globally and measuring how that's playing out, you know, and we'll describe that and talk about that in a second. I want to start with just a couple of definitions of things. I appreciate that this is a smaller slide, and I'd be happy to share with Guilherme and with you all the slide deck that I'm using here today so you can dig into this a bit more. But when we talk about an open health ecosystem, we're really talking about a collaborative model in which all stakeholders get to participate, and they can, at times they're collaborating, at other times they're competing, at other times they're co-creating. And it's this idea that you can bring all of these stakeholders together, work together to solve some of the most complex challenges that we have today. The use of health resources to be able to ensure everyone in the population lives healthy and well-being, and especially under areas like COVID, where we need this data and services delivered in a digital form really quickly to be able to respond to emerging crises. We're going to see that more with climate change impacts as well coming at us pretty fast. So again, we're going to need these sorts of ecosystem models where everyone can work together to solve those complex challenges. And also, you know, be an opportunity for innovation, for competitive advantage. If you're a researcher, it's important to have that prestige and the recognition, because that's how you get university tenure and get new research projects. So there's a whole range of different benefits that come out of having this ecosystem in place. Now, one of the core elements of an ecosystem that functions is, so here in this map, let me quickly describe it. We've got here in the middle the three players: health tech, governments, and then the health industry overall. In an open health ecosystem, they're making the data and the services that they have available via APIs. And then as those APIs are available, we'll describe what an API is in a minute, then out of that, then health tech new products and services can be built, and then they benefit here in the purple, individuals, like so individuals and households, communities, researchers, non-governments, and so on, all get a benefit out of it, and in turn that leads to value that's generated for all, and we'll describe that in a second as well. So when I say that APIs are the things that make all of this ecosystem possible, then what is an API? So that an API can sound like a technical term. It's an application programming interface. But really all it is it's connecting two systems. So it's connecting. So for example, you're probably familiar with payments, and you go to an online website, so Mercado Libre, for example, and you'll go to the checkout counter, and there you can pay in a variety of different ways. You can pay with a credit card, maybe you could pay directly from your bank account, and it offers you the opportunity for those. That is basically Mercado Libre is connecting that via an API to their payments infrastructure. So it's enabling that connection. But along the way, you can see that there's a whole range of other things besides that technical capability in place. For example, they need to have a contract to make sure that they're only connecting that with the right person or with the right organization. So there's no risk of someone else getting access to a bank account or credit card details. It's also an efficiency multiplier because Mercado Libre, for example, is able to put that on all of their shopping supermarkets. And I know that that's a brand that's got a whole range of different offers. They can put that payments functionality on all their different websites at once, so without having to rebuild it each time. It's an ecosystem builder because not only is it Mercado Libre, but it's all of the different payments providers that can possibly be part of that overall ecosystem. It's a digital enabler because it's enabling then for a whole shopping experience to be done digitally. And then underneath it all, it's sort of like the infrastructure element that's making all of that possible. So an application programming interface, it's technical, but there are business benefits to it. There's security and legal benefits and arrangements between it. So all up, it's got all of that in place. I love what Marco Panabianco says about government APIs. He's from Italy, and he says API actually stands for administrations, public value, and interoperability. And so when we think about an ecosystem, it's kind of doing that. It's making value generated. It's making the systems interoperable. And here on the right, then there's a quote from Mehdi Medjawi, another API industry thinker. And he says that APIs are not just a building brick, they're also a projection of the product vision. So based on what assets you've got, the data, the services you've got. And here, a great image from from Lego, really demonstrating if Lego's the API, you're putting things together, but underneath it, it's actually making the airplane. It's making the dinosaur image. When you're building open ecosystems, when they're based on that sort of APIs, then but one of the core elements is that no one's going to trust that all of those things can be connected if you don't have a trustworthy ecosystem operating. And this is especially true within health ecosystems. No one's going to be willing to say that their data can be shared with an external researcher if they don't believe that that research is going to respect and use their data appropriately, or whether it's going to be sold to an insurance company that's then going to charge you more for your insurance based on based on your risk profile or so on. So there's a whole range of like risks that people need to feel comfortable about before they share their health data. And so we've been thinking at Platformable about the sort of model that would sit behind an open health data ecosystem that would make it more trustworthy. And we've come up with this continuous engagement, continuous consent sort of approach, where anyone who's opening up or is a part of that stakeholder network for an open health ecosystem needs to be involved in describing what the value of opening up health resources is. They need to be honest about sharing the risks and how they're managing those risks. We need some accountability processes in place so that there are those checks and balances. And then individuals or organizations or startups or research institutions or governments, they need to be able to be involved in the consent to be able to say what they're actually consenting to. So it can't be just like, we're going to share all of your health data. You need to be able to have consent to particular characteristics. So for example, I'm willing to share my health data for particular research on diabetes management and better diabetes therapies. Like that might be one of it. And I give that consent for the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, and so that's the consent that needs to be developed. Not I give consent for all of my health data to be shared for whatever exploratory research you want to do. We don't want to have, like, that's not going to work as far as building that trustworthy data ecosystem. Now, globally, there are data privacy legislations that are in place that are meant to protect that so that that doesn't become a risk. And then there are particular technologies like Alias here mentioned on the left, who actually embeds that into their tech stack. So as the open health ecosystem evolves, you can have technologies that help you steer through some of those trustworthy decisions. So when it comes to exposing the data, programs like Alias that are embedded into the tech stack can then say, you don't have the consent approvals to start sharing that data. So you need to go back and do that work first. So it's not, so we don't need to also be weighed down by the health ecosystem requiring all of these checks and balances being done manually. The beauty of the technology is that we can sort of programmatically enforce these data rights of individuals. What we've looked at when we've looked at the health data ecosystems globally is that if there was data privacy regulations in place that were understood, analyzed, and able to be put in place, that wouldn't be enough to actually stimulate greater innovation amongst the health ecosystem, because there isn't the data governance systems in place by all of the different stakeholders where they're able to clean the data, make sure it's valuable, and then set up sharing agreements for how that data is being managed and shared with external providers. So there's a lot of opportunity to work on that area. In the US, what we've seen there is that they actually have regulations and legislation that enforces that certain providers must make health data available. So, for example, their electronic health record system says that the providers must make the electronic health records available using an open standard. And so that by having that open standard embedded in who gets funded for health service delivery and so on, makes it ensure that then that's going to be available as a raw ingredient, if you like, for building new health tech solutions, being able to do analysis and so on. And it's interesting, I know we're going to talk about open banking when we chat with Guillaume, but one of the things that I think is different for the US is in the US, they don't have strong open banking regulations, not to the level like they do now in Brazil, not to the level like they do in Europe. And so what has ended up happening is you don't have a strong banking and fintech ecosystem in the US, whereas you start seeing the emergence of that in Brazil, and we're seeing that in the UK and Europe. And so whereas it's the reverse with health. In health, they do have that regulation, and we are seeing the ecosystem develop, a digital health ecosystem develop in the US that we're not seeing yet in Brazil or Europe or the UK, for example. And finally, just one point that we noticed is that the data exists. There are actually data platforms, data repositories, and there are a growing number of APIs available that can be used to be able to connect systems and create new health apps and new products and services. And I'm going to describe some of these in a minute. Okay, but just one final word on the health ecosystems before we look at who's doing what with this. I really want to just describe what the value is. What's the point of all of this? Why do all of this? It's not just a technocratic approach. We're doing this because, as I say, health is a complex area. We've seen that with COVID. We can't have we could, but for whatever reason, society has decided that somewhere between 10 and 20% of GDP should be spent on health outcomes, and that's all we've got. So we've got to manage it within those resources. And an area like Brazil with such a large population, how do you do that? And so opening up health ecosystems, we've done the research on how value is generated, and it does lead to better health outcomes when there's that sharing of APIs and health data. There is reduced inequality, and I've got a great example from Brazil around that. There is optimized health systems where you're actually able to better allocate limited health resource dollars to where you're going to have the greatest impact. You can use the health ecosystem to encourage greater patient and public participation. You can expand innovation. And like I was saying earlier, you can give some professional recognition to academics and researchers. And there's also opportunities to encourage startups and large pharmaceuticals and everyone in between to be able to build a commercially viable product and opportunity out of this as well. So that's the value that we're documenting, that we're seeing is being generated from the use of open health, when there are opportunities to enter into an open health ecosystem. And now quickly, I mentioned that I was going to talk about a Brazil example. So under the Brazil's law that states that public data must be available as a public good, that was actually able to be used to be able to identify rural areas that weren't getting access to particular services, where there was higher maternal mortality rates, especially under COVID. And part of the issue was because in the past, there'd been some work on making sure that new doctors were being allocated to rural areas. And that was wound back, from my understanding, from our industry research and our discussion with some local stakeholders. And because of the data that was available, being able to demonstrate that the policy impact of pulling back the GP access in rural areas meant that the maternal mortality was going up. So that data was able to be used, and all of the stakeholders were able to participate in driving the fact that then new resources were allocated to those rural areas. So it's reducing inequalities, it's improving health outcomes, it's better resourcing of health dollars, just from using the data and from having this active ecosystem that's driving that participation and awareness of the health data. Really great outcome there. If you look at other examples globally, here's one from Iceland, about as further away from Brazil as you can get. Now, they've got an app that measures diabetic retinopathy. And so what they've done is, not only do they have that app, but then they've been able to look at the calculated risk that is used to determine whether there is a potential eye health risk in future. And they've released that as an API. So instead of just needing to use the app, if you've got a medical device, or if you're an optometrist, or some other or some other part of your hospital, and you want to be able to apply the risk calculator, the retina risk you can embed it, you can connect that via an API into your systems. You don't need to be drawing on any of the app data. You're drawing on that risk calculator, the algorithm that's used to determine the diabetic retinopathy risk, and then in your device or in your hospital system, you're able to apply that risk calculator to the data that you've got and better provide services to your populations. So already there's that connection to be. That's not just the data. That's not the data. In that case, it's the calculation. It's the algorithm that's being made available as an API. And there's other examples as well. Human API use health data to create a range of products in the US. Fair Health data use Medicare data, so the health insurance data, to be able to create tools like automatic doctor booking tools or healthcare booking tools, so that you're able to immediately use your own health data to be able to set up where you next need to see a healthcare professional and so on. Then there's other ones. So there's Care Vive, which looks particularly at how to improve the cancer patient's treatment experience. So there it's about improving that patient public participation in your own healthcare. And then again, another one around, some health messaging that's drawn up from looking at your health data, so whether that be your electronic health record or so on, and then applying what we know about population-wide health and for other people with similar characteristics, age, race and ethnicity, gender as you, and then them being able to to say, okay, this is what's worked for other people with your population characteristics. Maybe it'll work with you. Some of those sorts of things. So just very briefly, I'm going over time just a little bit. So I appreciate, Guilherme, that you offered a couple of minutes longer. So when, where we see open health systems globally is it's where open finance and where open banking was 2 years ago, for example. So again, we did this mapping, and here you can see the banks and the fintech in the middle here with the APIs. And again, that creating the value from, fintech being created and then others being able to generate out of it. When we looked at that, we found that globally, regulations were a driver of innovation. So by having regulations in place that particularly say, we should be opening up data and services, consumers should definitely have the consent, and as I've talked about, there's that flow where you can consistently involve the citizens and patients and community members in how that consent's given. But where regulations are in place to encourage API standards and the use of APIs to open up previously locked services, that's where you see the innovation occurring. Okay, so that's all I've got for the time that we've had available for this part of the presentation. I really appreciate the chance to just share some of our thinking. Please get in touch with us at Platformable. This is our bread and butter. This is what we're thinking about all the time. So, we love talking about it. So get in touch. I'd love to thank our team, a very diverse team that we've got as part of us, and I'm really grateful for everyone's contributions to our work. And here's our details. So please, let's connect. Thanks for the time to do a quick overview. Guilherme.
Clear, very clear for what's happened. One of the conditions in this open situation. Mark, in Brazil, we have, in terms of the open health, two different centers, two different approaches, okay? On one hand, you have private sector, okay? And data sharing in private sector, healthcare private sector, and you have necessity to improve offers, to reduce costing, to improve in services, and increasing competitiveness. It's the most important in this hand. In the other hand, you have a public sector and private sector together. Okay, in this case, the sharing of clinical data is facilitate care, increase access and value to diagnostic, to medical procedures, whatever. It's important to reduce the large fragmentation in the national system, in the healthcare national systems, public and private. One of the point important in all the world in Brazil is similar, is to create more conditions to use EHR, okay, in several situations, okay? The usability to EHR usability in Brazil is so poor. So my question, you believe that open health is possibly to create more increase in EHR usability? Because we have a large scale to share data. And it's very important because if it's not possible, I don't know if the open data is the Sant Graal. Okay, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think it is possible. It does take investment, but I don't know that I think it's at that tipping scale now where it takes just as much investment to maintain non-digital systems as it does to move to a digital system. So I think there are electronic health records systems in place, and we need to build up. So you've got the regions that and then and then you've got the nation. So there is the need for that sort of investment to be able to help from cities, regions, and then nationally to move to a digital infrastructure for electronic health records. And the few things that are needed for that is, one is the use of open standards. So there's models like OpenEHR, or OpenAir as it's called. There's models like the Fast Health Interoperability Resource. So there are already well-defined data models to enable interoperability of electronic health records. So there needs to be the deciding of which one you're going to go with and be able to build with those systems in place. Then I think it's, the way it happened in the US was, if you want to get funding as a hospital for providing services to your clients, you've got to use one of those. You've got to use an interoperable electronic health record system. We're seeing in Switzerland, normally it was a really competitive environment in research hospitals, so you wouldn't make your data interoperable because you want to save that for your competing for future research grants. And what Switzerland said was, you can only compete for this grant if you open up one of the data sets that you hold and make that standardized and interoperable, so that others can start building new insights based on your research data. So that's one issue there. The other one, just very quickly to mention, is the conditions for use that you raised, which is all about making sure that there is that consent. It should still be the patient that's deciding, beyond the healthcare engagement, who's getting to share that health data. And that the accountability framework is much easier to do if it's a digital system, rather than if it's by hand, where who knows who's copying your file. Whereas there is a trail of engagement with your electronic health record where you can see that. So from an accountability perspective, it's better. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You show in your presentation something about the regulatory status, okay? What do you think about is more important to consider in open health and regulatory legal, for example, or in terms of the GDPR? In Brazil, we have a GDPR every 3 years, okay? It's important to create value. But in terms of the general regulatory and open health situation, what you suggest, what you consider more important?
Look, I think Brazil is actually a world leader in some of this work. So if you look at what's happened with open banking, there's some really great regulations, and they've brought it in a way that's phased so that the large operators are required to get on board faster. So like they call it segment 1 and segment 2 banks. So for them, it's mandatory. They must move to these APIs. and so they've done that. Then they've done two other interesting things, I think. The first one is when you've got a fast payment system that's name has escaped me for the moment. But so that one where you can, by mobile, you can send money to someone and they instantly get it. Like it's a peer-to-peer new payment system. As that was introduced, they looked at the data and they found that the smaller businesses that needed access to that money when COVID was first hitting, they weren't downloading the app. They didn't have it. They didn't have the arrangements. So they set up a new body to specifically help the low-income businesses to be able to move to this system because it would speed up their cash flow. So they were looking, as they're rolling out, they're looking at their opportunity to reduce inequality. So that's the second thing. The third thing I really love is that they've got monthly data that's published on the number of API calls, who's using it, what it's happening. So you can see that it's how it's unfolding, and then you can address it. All of the ecosystem can be involved in measuring and monitoring it, and if that was applied to health.
Absolutely. I think in terms of the experience to open bank in Brazil, it's very, very interesting, the legacy. It's very important to provide this in terms of the open health. So, Mark, time's over. Okay, thank you very much again for your time, for your dedication. It's very important for us. You are a brilliant, and I'm invited you sometimes to discussion this point. Is very important in Brazil right now. Okay, I hope to see you in the next time in person. Okay, it's a big challenge for us.
Let's meet up. I would love that. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. I see you.
Thank you, everyone. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you. Muito bom. Vocês estão gostando do conteúdo? Olha, eu quero que você me conte aqui no chat, viu? Aliás, no começo da nossa tarde aqui, né, do nosso aquecimento hospitalar, eu te perguntei de onde vocês nos assistem. Algumas pessoas comentaram aqui no chat, então vou passar rapidinho, tá? A Josiane Vivian está em Curitiba, Alessandro da Rosa, Santa Catarina, Maria Silvia Lamarques de São Paulo, o Remy Mafri, ele diz que ele é estudante de engenharia lá do Rio de Janeiro também, a Tatiele, de Porto Alegre, Tamile Fortes, Belo Horizonte, Simão e muitas outras pessoas que se manifestaram. Que delícia ver gente aqui do Brasil inteiro acompanhando o aquecimento hospitalar. Olha, antes de continuar, eu quero fazer um convite, tá, para vocês conhecerem um projeto social muito bacana da Hospitalar em parceria com Horas da Vida. Olha só.
Todos conhecemos a dificuldade de acesso à saúde em comunidades periféricas. Por isso, a Hospitalar e o Instituto Horas da Vida criaram o projeto Doe Saúde, para atender e melhorar esse acesso em comunidades carentes. Você pode fazer parte disso e salvar vidas, doando horas de atendimento se tiver CRM ativo ou doando recursos financeiros. A partir de R$ 60, você garante a consulta a uma pessoa que precisa. Sua ajuda vale muito. Ajude-nos a alcançar nossa meta. Para saber mais ou doar, é só entrar no site da Hospitalar. Participe, salve vidas, faça a diferença.